Welcome to this short demonstration of Leapwork's generative AI capabilities that's helping enterprise software teams ensure higher quality faster across the entire customer journey. Everyone's deploying Copilot AI capabilities in their own applications. We'll show you how Leapwork is the perfect fit to make sure that wherever Copilot is deployed, it can be tested to work as expected. We've introduced 4 new building blocks into the Leapwork automation platform: validate, generate, transform, and extract. Let's start by looking at how the AI validate block can be used to validate output from Copilot. This block takes 2 values, an input, which could be something that a generative AI has generated, and an expected value, which is what we expect the generative AI should have generated. Of course, AI typically generates output in 1,000 different ways, which is what makes it so fun and engaging to interact with. So we can't just compare the output to a specific known piece of text. Instead, this block uses generative AI to figure out whether the input, in essence, means the same thing as the expected. For instance, if we set the input to 2 plus 2 and the expected to 4, when we run this flow, it passes because 2 plus 2 and 4 mean the same thing. We can use this to easily build data-driven tests for Copilot-based applications. Let's start with just using copilot.microsoft.com. If we ask Copilot, who is Satya Nadella, we expect the answer to be that he's the CEO of Microsoft. We can take the generated answer from Copilot and use it in our validate block, comparing it to he is the CEO of Microsoft. When we run this now, it passes. We validated that Copilot answered this question correctly. We can expand on this by using an Excel file that contains hundreds or even thousands of different things to input into a Copilot-based application and then validate that the generated output is as expected. Using Excel and Leapwork to drive tests with data is very simple. We just add the block, point to an Excel file, and select the range of inputs and expected results to work with. For instance, if the Copilot application is specifically engineered to never answer questions outside the scope of a certain problem domain, we can write a few hundred different questions that we know Copilot should always reply, "That's outside my expertise," to. Now let's look at a real-life example of testing Copilot in the Power Platform, which can turn a single line of text into a complete automation flow with one or many steps using AI. We'll use the exact same method as before with an Excel file filled with inputs and expected outputs to test that all the individual components of the flow being generated live up to expectations. It really is that simple. List the inputs and the components that must be generated by Power Automate based on each input, wire up the data from the Excel file to the rest of the Leapwork flow, and click Run. Running this every 10 minutes or even every hour gives unique and valuable insights into the robustness of the Copilot implementation. And as errors occur, they can be used by the team, including video recordings of what happened, to assess the quality and harden the Copilot implementation. Now let's talk about how to use generative AI in the Leapwork automation platform to boost productivity, create perfectly fitting test data on the fly, integrate complex API endpoints, and more. We'll start by looking at the AI generate building block. This block can generate any kind of test data on the fly based on a prompt. For instance, generate a US postal address on the East Coast. We can define any kind of structured output fields, such as street name and number, zip code, city, and so on. The AI-generated output can of course be used in any kind of application across the entire tech stack, from Dynamics 365 web applications to desktop to green screens to mobile and everything else in between. If we run this simple flow, we can see that the AI generate block has generated an address as expected, ready to be used in a test flow. Let's use this approach to simply type addresses into Notepad as a placeholder for any kind of application. We'll use the type text block for that and wire up each of the generated fields: street, name and number, city, zip, and so on. We can of course format how we use the fields. It could be street name and number, comma, zip code, and then city. And finally, we can add a new line so that we can generate many addresses if we want. Here's Notepad ready to receive the address when we run the flow. We'll just add a pass block for good measure. Now, when we run this flow, the address is in fact typed into Notepad, and we can run it again just to get another address on the US East Coast. The AI generate block is an incredibly powerful way to generate real-life test data for complex processes, from addresses to patient data, user accounts, invoice content, and anything else really. Here are a few other examples of things that can be easily generated. For instance, a Spanish sounding name for a boy, first name and last name separated out. And here, some shady looking user information. The most important aspect is that the written prompt and the desired output fields can be used with high precision to generate anything. Next, we'll look at the AI transform building block. This block is an incredible productivity booster in all kinds of testing because it can take any text input and transform it into anything else using AI. For instance, if we enter the number 523 into the input field and we ask the block to translate it to French, it will do just that. We can use a type text block again, just like we did before, to type the result directly into Notepad. But this could of course be any kind of application. Click run and the translation to French happens on the fly. Translating data from one language to another makes testing multilingual Copilot and other applications very simple. But the AI transform block has more tricks up its sleeve. It can transform complex data into bite-sized chunks and then iterate over them. For instance, say we have a list of fruit, apples, oranges, pears, kiwi. We can use the block to split it into a list and uppercase the first letter of each item. We then switch the block to output all items one at a time and only pass when it's all completed. We'll just reformat the type text block to include a new line after each item. And now when we run, the fruit is typed into Notepad one at a time with a new line after each one. Let's also have a look at the AI extract building block. This block can extract structured data from otherwise unstructured or semi-structured sources. For instance, emails, PDF invoices, screen scrapes, and so on. This will easily extract data that is otherwise scattered or slightly obfuscated in the input text into a very structured format. Here's an example of some not exactly structured text that could easily have been scraped from an invoice or a customer comment. We can extract things like full name, email, and employer from this content in a very simple and robust manner. Running this flow will yield exactly what you would expect. The full name, the email address, and the employer as well. This also works for structured data such as JSON or XML coming in from API endpoints. Here are a couple of examples that show how even changes in structure is handled without issue. When we run this first AI extract, it extracts the window title, the width, and the size from this JSON document without having to define any technical details about how to do it. And here next to it is the exact same data, but this time in XML format. Using the same AI extract block, Leapwork can extract the window title, the width, and the size from there as well. The change in format is automatically handled by the AI. This makes working with data from all types of data sources very simple, including API endpoints. Finally, let's look at an example that combines several of these advanced generative AI capabilities into a single flow. Here we call an API endpoint, which serves a JSON document with a lot of user information. If we take a look at the URL in Edge, we can see that it contains a lot of usernames and other information. In this flow, we use an HTTP block to call the URL, then take the whole response body and transform it with AI to get each of the names from the JSON. We then extract the first name and the last name from each one, and finally output each in a specific format, last name, comma, first name. The result is an incredibly easy and powerful way to use generative AI to work with structured and unstructured data, a real productivity booster.